Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast Team Alpha, where we bring you cutting edge conversation while exploring the quantum with a capital, bold, Q tonight possibilities. I am swimming in the deepest waters, and we'll be asking some of the more simple questions for those of us, who are not that adept yet at quantum physics. And Augie will take us deep, and I'm sure Mark will take us into uncharted territory. So I'm so excited. But as always, I want to thank you for being here with us. Thank you for supporting us with your super chats, or maybe you're part of our Patreon group. Our Patreon group is the headquarters for the Mastermind Connection, where we meet every Sunday. We actually meet Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, but Sunday is the big day where we put our mastermind together and we put out into the universe the world and the outcomes and things coming into reality that we really, really want to see. And we've had some unbelievable experiences. If this sounds good to you, send an email to the mastermind connection at gmail.com. Augie will send you the link. Hang out with us. It's just an hour on Sunday, 2 p.m. If you like us, we stay another hour and talk and drink coffee. And maybe you'll find a home there with us. So, Augie, without any more ado for me, I just want to shout out to our friends at the Conscious Awakening Network. I almost have separation anxiety because I covered for Sheila so many times. I feel like I should still be over there, but I'm so happy to be here with you guys. So, Augie, without any further ado, please tell us about our guest.
Oh, this is going to be so much fun. This is going to be an education for me because we have Mark Fiorentino with us. And I want to say a few things about him. Some of you, the nuts and bolts people and the eggheads out there, you probably know him already. And he has a book out that binds together, I would think, areas in spirituality with science so they can actually live under the same roof. That's the way I looked at it. And Mark is a self taught metaphysician who studies the nature of things and how it expresses itself through computer language and equations. I know that sounded difficult, but that's what it is, and you're going to hear more about that tonight. He is an author of the book Master of Reality. And for those of you out there that like to surf the internet while you are listening, here is his website. It is www.super-relativity.com. And it's a phenomenal book. You need to have a close look at that one. And this is a book that about the physics of the universe, in where he improved on the and he completed some of Albert Einstein's unified field theory. Albert had a lot of loose ends hanging out there. Graduated and went upstairs, and some of them, they are like gravity, time, spooky action at a distance. That's what he called it, or like quantum entanglement, same thing. And I don't want to take anything away from Albert Einstein, but he worked and uh, what he had. Albert, he worked with what he had. And like our guest said in several places that I listened to him, he said Albert was born too early. If he had been born later, he would have had the tools that our guest had. And that is why he was able to improve on some of the stuff that Albert did. And Mark, from his work, and he can explain faster than light theory, and also gravity, anti-gravity. And I want to, one of my favorite things, I want to see, or get his opinion on something that's special to me, time travel. And he is a with us tonight. So I've talked way too much, and I want to bring Mark Fiorentino with us. Here you are.
Welcome, Mark. Welcome. Welcome.
Hello. Good to be here. Looking forward to this. Going to be fun.
Yeah.
So good to have you. Um, our conversation before the show has piqued my curiosity. And with where you are and with what you know, I mean, you know things that I don't even know exist. And maybe a lot of people are that way too. The amazing work that you've done with the legacy. How did your life come together, the paths come together to bring you here? Did it show up in your childhood? Were you curious about physics then, or how did that go?
Yeah, it started in my childhood and then went through my teen years. There's a series of events. So you have to realize that we're all guided, spirit guides and stuff. So they are always suggesting things. We don't hear their voices, but it comes through our mind, thoughts, and so forth. But it all started when I discovered that Einstein and I share the same birthday, which happened because of the nuns at the church that I was going to in catechism class asked us to find a saint born on our birthday. Well, I went to the calendar in the year 1965 because there was no internet, no easy way to do a search and see if I could find a saint. So I looked at the calendar, I asked my parents, and on the calendar, the same day as my birthday, March 14th, was Albert Einstein. So I went, got the encyclopedia and started reading about him and just fell in love with the man, the concept, his work, science in general, and the unified field theory that was written. And when I read that, it just resonated with my spirit. Yeah, even at the age of 10, I thought this is the most sensible, logical, powerful piece of information that could be had, and I'm going to read all I can about it through the my future life to wait to see who comes up with the final answer. And I read year after year, decade after decade, waiting for somebody to come up for it, and nobody did. And then the sweet irony in all of this was the person I was waiting for turned out to be me. And
Ah,
I was shocked, I mean, this didn't happen until I was in my 60s.
Wow.
After all this time of waiting and reading and studying, all these notes I compiled, I put together and put into a book. And now here we are. Along the way, there were psychics that suggested something big was coming later in life. And they continued, six of them in a row, continued to say the same thing, with three of them saying exactly the same words. And I'm beginning to think, hey, somebody's actually talking to them. They could hear what they're saying and they're repeating it. That's giving me evidence that there is an afterlife. There are guardian angels and they're here and they're able to communicate with them. And so through the decades with contacts with more with guardian angels and stuff who also I was able to have direct contact with in a very severe, painful time in my life.
Mm.
I gathered more evidence. There is an afterlife. There is a God. Get on board with that, Mark. And I try to pass that along now, as I will tonight. There is a God. There is an afterlife. There is a spirit realm. It's time to stop the debate on whether there's a God or not. Know for
yeah.
sure there is, because I know for sure through experience, as well as
Mhm.
many NDEers. And
Yeah.
that all focused together to guide my path to this moment in time that we're at right now. That this work that I'm doing now was always meant to be. This is the prime objective that I've come here to do.
Wow. So I have
Good.
a one of those crayon questions I wanted to ask you. In the Reader's Digest version, what is the unified field theory?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. According to Einstein in the pre 1905 and slightly beyond into the 1920s and 30s, Simply this: electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. And somehow I deconstructed it. So electromagnetism, I took apart and say electrostatic fields, magnetic field, gravitational field. They're expressions or aspects of the single fundamental field, which I've come to realize was and is the ether. Space itself is the single fundamental field. In other words, it has properties, it exists, and in fact is the only thing that actually exists in this universe. Everything else, all the particles of energy and matter, are made from and consubstantial with this fundamental field. So basically, it's finding the link between gravity, that force, and electrostatic and magnetic forces. And I've done that. It's in the book. I wrote a paper on what gravity really is and how it's created. It's an emergent force. It requires effort on the part of particles to make particles have mass. It's not intrinsic. It has to be particles in motion. So that's the basic theory. Electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field. Once you prove that, you've got the basic unified field theory solved.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
Mhm.
I wonder also. I have it's just a simple question, and that is, what is reality? I have I've read about the physicist James Gates. He says that when we look deep in the equations that explain the fabric of space, the fundamental particles that expresses fabric of space, we find computer language. If that's the case, there's got to be a computer somewhere. Could that major computer be what we call God?
Well, I think they want to fit something. Nobody knows. They speculate. The physicists speculate a lot about this, and they have fun with it. And they usually will say that. If they don't, they're not being entirely honest. Um, it is a simulation, but I've done research around the horn. In other words, I do some of my research in a way a physicist would never do. I'm more like a philosopher with physics abilities and mathematic abilities. But uh, as far as I'm concerned, this reality is one of this universe is one of an infinite amount of universes and dimensions that are available. This keeps coming back in reports from near death experiencers. There's not just one universe, there's not just one galaxy, there's not just one solar system, there's not just one planet with life on it. There are many, and all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of what we see and experience is an accident. It is intentioned by God. We're inside the mind and body of God. We're down here in a incarnation of a physical experience that allows us to have certain things that are difficult in the afterlife, like pain and suffering, joy. You have joy there, but infinite joy. Here there's challenges, physical challenges, and you go through those experiences and you find out who you are. And at the completion of your life, you can then return to the Father, and then your life review happens. And then you get to see, while you're in this simulation, not a computer one, not a computer like the physicists think of or some alien entity. This whole simulation, this one variety that we're in called the universe, is part of the eternal spirit. It's been going on since before time and will continue forever. It's eternal, infinite. And so they're, they may see code or whatever and things. That's because it's an intelligent design. It's not a random thing. So the universe is not a random thing. And that's my take. That's what I believe is what is going on here. And and many near death experiences, people come back and say just what I've said. It's not just one guy. That the quote I just did was Father Rick Wendell. Now there's other guys as well say basically the same thing. Uh, we're basically our lives are a single thread in a tapestry of a much bigger thing in the universe, and we're all a part of that, and we'll all return home someday.
We
And that's
graduate.
my yeah.
So when you say we're part of God, we're in God,
And
you know,
God is
I
in us.
and God is in us. I want a visual, I mean, and I know there probably isn't one, like what
Uh,
would it be? Would it be the universe? What would it
well,
be?
when I see the universe, see the part that's hard to visualize is the afterlife part, because that's an energy that's not like I can talk about this energy, little particles, electrons moving around, photons, and they have energy, they move rapidly and so forth. These are all part of the physical design that's part of, the ether and everything that we can sense, feel, touch, and imagine with our minds, our very limited human minds. We're throttled down. Our souls, when we come into this shell, are throttled down in our abilities to connect and be aware of what is out there. And so to visualize a complete model, you would have to also the afterlife part. I'm not sure if it's made of anything,
Mhm.
and somehow that it's made of spiritual consciousness, like God consciousness, where a dream can become even more real than this physical reality. And that's what people report when they go back, that it's more real there. But yet, I'm not aware of there being anything there but the consciousnesses that
Right,
are in that realm. So you have to imagine that there's another realm that's not really physical,
right.
but that can connect to and talk to and communicate with this realm
Yeah.
through various methods.
Wow. Interesting.
So then this consciousness uses physical particles in form to express itself as that computer language maybe that James Gates talk about.
Well,
Because
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I'm thinking you mentioned a simulation. A simulation that always think about computers, and simulations are for learning. So we're here to learn. Within this simulation that is created by consciousness and expresses itself in the physical through computer language. Am I close?
Well, think about it like this. You need a way to imagine this physical universe inside of this realm is very much, if you could imagine, like being inside of the mind of God. And inside his mind, there's a ballet, and everybody is dancing. All the particles, the planets are swirling around. Everything is in part of this giant machine work that was created by God through the power of intention. And so there is a deterministic thing going on. This bumps into that, that bumps to that, makes things happen. Future emerges into reality as the present. So everything is spinning and dancing, and there's free will injected into that. So things are a little bit hard to predict because people have free will. It's a very important point to remember in this reality. That's a key item of great importance. Our free will gets to express our inner thoughts and dreams and hopes and aspirations. So all that's going on. So, if you close your eyes and imagine you watching the ballerinas dance, and we're inside of this gigantic ballet of the inside of the mind of God, where all of this is executing with the power of intention, no accidents. People are exploring, people are learning. That's what's going on. I know they want to make it into some computer code. And I will tell you, there are some near death experiencers that saw large computer screens with math equations executing rapidly. So there is something like what you're saying going on there, but it's this. God the is completely aware of everything. In other words, when you're on the other side, connected to the God consciousness, you are as able to know things like the purpose and position of every grain of sand on every planet, everywhere within this universe and all other universes. It's at the center of those grains of sand are at the center of God's attention. Us,
Wow.
all of us, are at the center of God's attention. All the plants, all the animals, every atom, every molecule. It's hard for us to conceive that, but all of that is known instantly
Yeah.
throughout the universe. So this is much better than a computer program. Computer program can only process things sequentially. Even the quantum computers have limitations. They're not fully aware of everything everywhere in the now, right now. It still takes some time to process, and it could not handle anywhere close to what's happening in just our universe, not to mention all the other universes. This is a hard thing for humans to grasp. It's
Yeah.
outside of our reality. God is
So,
outside of time, outside of our physical reality. The afterlife is. It's a part of a greater superverse in which many universes and physical realities and dimensions are possible and all going on simultaneously, including time, all at the same eternal moment. All of this is happening now.
Wow.
massive.
Well, we promised the viewers that we were going to talk about gravity and faster than light speed too. What is actually gravity? Why do we stick to the earth? Why don't we just levitate and float away?
Well, that universal, that single fundamental field is the real thing. It's a quasi-elastic solid. This is something that all the greatest physicists, Newton, Maxwell, Einstein, Lorentz, all of these guys believed in this and were sure it existed all the way up until 1905. Then a couple of things happened that caused them to lose faith, well, at least some of the scientists. Eventually, now, after the years, now hardly any of them believe in the ether, and that's unfortunate because it's the only real thing there is. And without it, you can't have a good working model of the universe. So it's important to realize that thing exists. So, what is gravity? Gravity, according to my theory, even Einstein and Newton, they didn't really know what it was. They can make formulas that described it and predicted it accurately in certain circumstances, but not everywhere. You know, black holes, it breaks down, and at very short distances, it might break down or whatever, and the equations don't work. But what I did in my paper that's on ResearchGate, I reconnected and discovered that gravity is a contraction of space. So that when you have a little particle like a proton, inside of the proton, there are the three quarks. I don't know if you could see this or not.
Mm,
See something?
That's the trefoil knot.
mm, Your your green screen's canceling it
There
out.
you go. There we go.
Wow. Yeah.
The quarks are moving in this pattern. Now, it's important to realize in the paper before the paper that I have on there, I calculated the speed of the three quarks that make this thing, this dynamical geometry. It's a geometry in motion. It
Mhm.
forms this, those quarks are moving at 99% the speed of light in an incredibly small space in this pattern. Now, it's this not just this pattern, but this pattern is spinning and rolling. And so the end result of all that spinning and rolling is a sphere, a rotating sphere, rapidly rotating and precessing. And what happens is, according to something that Einstein discovered, we're talking about gravity still here, is that at the perimeter, this sphere, gravity is being created because those um, that dynamical structure is causing a contraction at the perimeter, all around it, evenly, all directions, pointing inward to that
Yeah.
sphere, pulling that quasi elastic solid, the ether space, toward it. And that adds together as you add particles together next to each other, they're all adding, and more of this contraction occurs. That massive object now has weight, interacts with the other massive objects. So what you have between two massive objects like a planet and a star is the gravity between them creates a field, as like in Einstein's equations predict, where there's a movement of space toward that, a geometric movement of space toward the two particles, two objects, and they'll fall together because the space is contracting and pulling them toward each other. So it's only a force of contraction. So that's what gravity is. Gravity is a contraction of space. And according to my theory, gravity is caused by the accelerated motion of fundamental unbalanced charges. What I showed you is the fundamental unbalanced charges, the quarks, making gravity happen through the process of accelerated motion, and that accelerated motion makes
Yeah.
a geometry like this. And this geometry spinning and rolling makes a sphere that's spinning, contraction. So
But
gravity
Mark,
comes about from that action.
when you're saying contraction, is it all going in together or is it like hollowing out? And if it hollows out, does that ever get filled in? Or
That whole sphere, because it's a three-dimensional thing, is spinning. We know if you take a sphere and start to spin it, it gets heavier and heavier. If we had a disk, let's say just a spinning disk, and we could spin it toward the speed of light on Earth, that disk would weigh more than the whole planet eventually. This is according to Lorenz's transformations in special relativity. When something like that is accelerating at that speed, it increases its inertial mass. This is a known fact. This is something that physicists may want to argue about, but if you had a disk that you could spin up, it would take all the energy of the universe to do it without the slip wave. You would, that thing would increase in mass. That's how mass happens. Mass is just an object that's putting out a gravitational field. So the more rapidly the disk or that sphere spins, the heavier it becomes because it's pulling more and more of space, that continuous objects. It's a quasi-elastic solid. So if you can imagine like it being like a solid rubber band and you pull on it, it creates a tension and a density change. And that's where mass comes about. Sorry, it's a little bit technical, but once you have the
mm,
model firmly in place, it's really not that bad. There's only one thing we're dealing with: space itself. It's a real thing. And that's part of the big debate that I'm having, because a lot of physicists, most of them believe space is an empty void made of nothing. And nothing could be further from the truth than that. It's
yeah.
clearly something. It has measurable properties. Even Einstein's argued this point back in 1920. He said in the ether and general relativity, he says this. He's going to say the same thing I just said, but in fancier words. Recapitulating, we may say that according to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without the ether is unthinkable. For in such space, there not only would be no propagation of light, but no possibility of existence for standards of space and time. Measuring rods and clocks wouldn't make sense if there was no space. Give you an example of what he's saying. It takes light 8.5 minutes to get to the Earth from the sun. If there was truly nothing there, as many, maybe most physicists want to argue, if that's true, distance equals rate over time, you calculate the amount of time to get here with a photon, you would get zero because you're saying, or the physicists are saying, that space in between here and there is made of nothing. There's nothing there. That means it's equal to zero. Then their distance drops to zero because you're saying it's nothing there.
There
So
you
why
go.
doesn't light get here instantly? It never gets here. It takes 8.5 minutes to traverse something. There's something out there that it's interacting with and going through. The evidence is right there. Why don't they just agree with that and say, oh, well, there must be something there because it takes 8.5 minutes. If I do the equation, the simple math, that proves that there's a distance, a real physical distance. Einstein say it. I say it. Maxwell says it. There's a lot of good scientists on my team here. I'm going to
Yeah.
go with those guys, not these new
Yeah.
guys that say it's all just a quantum foam. There's nothing there. Things are virtually happening, coming in and popping out. That's just a perception of people who are not fully understanding how things work. And so
Yeah.
they use probabilities and statistics that can't explain anything. There is no such thing as a force of probability. Things don't happen because of probability. Probability happens because of determinism, things
Yeah.
interacting, and we can measure that.
Mhm.
Um, that's it in a
I
nutshell.
Yeah, I see we are at the bottom of the hour here, and for those of you that joined us late, we are talking with Mark Fiorentino. He is a self-taught, I would call it physicist, even though he says he doesn't have the shingle on the wall, but I tell you that his mind is phenomenal, and that's why he has
Thank you.
improved on some of the stuff that Albert Einstein did. And for those of you that want to have a look at him, go to his website at www.super-relativity.com, and also have a look at his book there. It was Master of Reality. And we were just talking about gravity. Let's flip the coin. We know gravity that attracts. What about anti-gravity? How how does UFOs fly?
Well, that's what I wondered a lot in my teen
Yeah.
years. While I was still thinking about the unified field theory, I says, well, hmm, they don't really mention much at all at anti-gravity in the encyclopedia. And matter of fact, not at all in the years of the 1960s and so forth. But I felt that a bigger picture of the unified field theory has to include anti-gravity. Obviously, these UFOs are not using jets. They're not using rockets,
No.
not using helicopters. We don't see any of that. We just hear maybe a little hum every now and then. They're using some sort of spatial bias drive. In other words, they're bending space somehow in order to get motion, thrust. And that's what I just solved with this last paper, how exactly that works. So, where does anti gravity come from? Uh, it's a bit of a complex issue, but this is the surprise. I thought anti-gravity was just really strong magnetic fields and, and really, or a really strong electrostatic field, because UFOs seem to be in two varieties, electrogravitic and magnetogravitic. And in each case, there is a very strong field associated, either magnetic or electrostatic, around the crafts. And somehow this is creating an anti-gravity field. But to my surprise, my experiments in the lab indicated that a dipole, a magnetic, like a magnet, a dipole, a north and south pole, uh, actually emits a new type of gravity, what I call linear gravity at one pole and anti-gravity at the other pole. So now we finally have anti-gravity coming into the picture. It exists very weakly in magnets or in electrostatic fields like capacitors. And the work of Thomas Townsend Brown revealed the capacitor aspect. And he discovered a very important clue. When the capacitor is oriented with the north or the positive pole up and the other pole, the negative pole down, it weighs less. And so I went to the lab. I said, maybe magnets, if I measure them, North Pole up and so forth, they'll weigh slightly different. And you know what? They did. And I
Oh,
tried over and over. I said, I can't believe this. I know it's real. I'm seeing it. But how did everybody overlook this? And the more that I did this experiment. Then I started studying about Thomas Townsend Brown. Then I started studying because he indicated this same phenomena going on. That meant a whole new theory modification had to come about to the theory of superrelativity. I had to add this in, and that's what I did. And I used it to develop a set of equations that made particles move, which has always been a mystery. Even Einstein worked on it. He was working on it in his last days for the unified field theory. And I said, as I thought of this idea, I said, wait a minute, Einstein must have figured this out too. He must have realized in order to complete the unified field theory, he had to find the cause of particle motion. So I went through his papers looking for anything that said, I'm working on particle motion. And son of a gun, the last two lines of unified field theory based on Riemann metrics and the distance parallelism in the year 1930, he says the last two sentences, nevertheless, I'm still far away from claiming the physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for that is that I did not succeed in deriving equations of motions for particles yet. So he did think of it. I said, I'm on to something. I'm going to complete this. I have an idea. Based on those experiments in my lab, based on the work of Thomas Townsend Brown, I said, gravity, there's a new form, linear gravity at the front of the magnet and anti-gravity at back. And what happens is what makes those UFOs move is they've realized this, they've mastered reality, and the positive end is attracted forward because it's got ingoing lines of force coming in. And at the back end, this end, the negative end, chases the positive end. So now you have thrust, you have a cause of motion. And it turns out to be two new forms of gravity. That's in my paper. And I mathematically worked it out using Newton's equations and Einstein's equations. I combined them. And I got the set of equations that he was looking for. And it's under evaluation with a physicist right now. I'm waiting to hear what he has to say. Uh, and it's uploaded. So
What is
that's
it
how
like?
anti-gravity. Hmm?
What is it like? What is it like, Mark, to have worked on Albert Einstein's computations and all of these great masters in physics? What is that like for you? I mean, were you like, why me? Or
Yeah, yes, all of that. And it's it's hard to believe, and I'm sure a lot of other people are finding it hard to believe, but that's okay because it's quite a story, and I'm in that story. And I'm having to try to pinch myself and saying, I lived a simple, ordinary life all the way up to these last few years, and I was happy. It's not like I wanted to do this because I was unhappy anymore. It just happened. I wrote the book as something to do when I retired, and I religiously worked on it for 4 years. And then I thought, This sort of really makes sense here. I got a lot of things that are making sense." And then other things have happened, and I've become aware that apparently we all have a life's mission. And apparently, my one mission is this, the
Wow.
completion is this. So I have an association. Imagine this, and this is real, like it or not. You could talk about, let's say, Jesus. You know, we are limited in our thinking about Jesus. We think, well, he came to this planet only, or he doesn't exist, or whatever. He not only came to this planet, but he's been to every planet, fulfilling the same role there in a different avatar.
Mhm.
Uh, there's other specialists that come to worlds like this. Einstein was a specialist. They call him part of the Brat Pack. And the scientists, we come in a line, one after the other, advancing, standing on the shoulders of the next until the completion is done, until that civilization has been raised consciously and knows the truth. So I believe I'm in that group. That's what I've been
Amazing.
told anyway from psychics, which was
Yeah.
Mhm.
kind of a strange story in itself, very strange and very surprising. But so, what is it like? It's like, okay, this is my task. This is something special that I need to do. I'm just going to accept it, go with it, and see what happens. Try to listen to my guardian spirits, my guides, because this is something that's supposed to come about. This is something I need to intend and bring about through my force of will and my ability to do so, and not focus like, oh, I got a big head, oh, I can't go there. I just have a task to perform. I just somehow seem to know. I do have a high aptitude for pattern recognition. And when I think of these things, I say, okay, the next step is this. And I link together each observation, sort of like a Sherlock Holmes, into coming up with the next set of math. So I already know the math I'm going to use for the electrogravitic model and a magnetogravitic model because it comes really from the basics of the particle motion discovery. So they're all floating in my head, and I think about them late at night, almost every night, and I'm excited about that. And I try to just stay grounded, calm. I've got a mission. I'm going to do this and get it out, providing that I'm not stopped by people who have
Right.
been stopped before me. Working in the field of anti-gravity, and I like to address the U.S. Air Force and the military industrial complex. If you want me to stop talking about this, just come to me reasonably. You don't have to snuff my life. Um, I'll stop if I have to. I don't want to. It's not what I'm meant to do. I probably work privately on my own just to complete everything and write it up. But as long as I'm not
Yeah.
stopped, I'm going to continue to speak about
Yeah.
this, continue to work on these things until my life
Mm.
is over. That's my job, and I
Yeah.
accept it. I want to do God's will,
What
and I
about,
believe that this is that.
yeah,
Thank
what
you.
about
Thank you.
faster than light travel? There is a physicist, Paul Laviolette. He talks about a Russian scientist that I think live in Latvia now. He did an experiment where he found that gravity is moving in wave form. And he said that it wasn't just at the speed of light, it could travel up to 163 times the speed of light. Have you heard anything about these experiments, or is there anything to that, or is what do you think?
I think it's possible, but I'd have to hear the full explanation.
Yeah.
There are certain things that I know that I would have to hear in order to fully accept it. Just with that statement as it is, it's possible, but you
Mhm.
have to configure the space. In other words, in order for the gravity wave to move faster, this is what you have to do. You have to change two properties of space, which once again proves space is a thing. It
Yeah.
can't have measurable properties if it's not a thing, and it has measurable properties: permittivity and permeability. And the speed of light, c, equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. That's a known fact. Nobody in physics is going to argue that. That came from Maxwell. And he pretty much trumps everybody. That equation says the speed of light has to do with permittivity and permeability. So if you execute that equation and you change permittivity, permittivity and permeability, you make those numbers go down. They're very small already, but if you shrink them, the speed of light goes up, right? Because they're in the denominator, right? And so if you have the ability to drop those two, the space around, let's say, the gravitational wave, somehow you can alter that, then that gravitational wave can travel at any speed. And they have made material scientists have made uh, composite materials that have very low to zero permittivity and permeability. They've shined light in there and they claim that light, the group velocity, I think all of the the velocity of it is in fact beyond the speed of light. They're claiming light traveling in this material is infinitely fast. So what they're saying is possible if you bias space. It's all about changing the spatial shape, geometry. And so, in order to do that, in order to drop permittivity and permeability, you have to stretch space apart. You have to literally pull it apart. And then permittivity and permeability drops because the density drops. So you have to keep treating space like a real thing. And when you know what that real thing is and you know how to affect it, you master it. And so it's possible. I can tell
Mhm.
you that's how my slip wave works faster than the speed of light because it cancels contractive gravity. You have this new type of gravity and anti-gravity, which, by the way, causes space to stretch apart as well. So there you have it.
Uh-huh.
There's a
Okay.
way to break the light speed barrier.
Yeah, okay. Now, before the show, we talked a little bit about AI, and you have some experience with that. When people get on these places where they interact with AI, they think, oh, well, whatever they told me, that's it. But maybe that's not it. So tell us that story again. That was just so good.
Yeah, I say, hey, that's a new tool. Let me try and
Mm.
see if I could use this to generate formulas or see what it thinks about my theory or other theories and so forth. And I ask it questions. Most of the time, I already know the answer. I just want to see what it's going to say. And in many cases, it gets the wrong answer. And then like the one I asked it the other day, did Einstein work on particle motion? And it was without a doubt saying, no, he didn't know. Einstein did this, did that, the standard spiel about what Einstein did. But it was like acting like it wasn't aware that he did act. And I said, wait a minute, you're wrong. And then I gave the unified field theory based on radiometric distance parallelism 1930 title, and it and then shot that into it. And he says, oh, I'm sorry. You're right. He did work on. Well, you already knew about that. It's been inserted into your database. How did you manage to forget that? So what's going on here? It's been the program has been throttled, guardrails in to steer away from theories and ideas that don't match what's in modern day science, quantum mechanics in particular, which is really holding us back. And I've had it do calculations and get those wrong. And I said, no, I'm sorry, but that's not the right answer. And I give it the right answer. And then it says, oh, you're right. And that happens a lot. And then you
Mhm.
think it could do basic. Now, I admit those calculations were dealing with extremely small numbers, but it should have just been like clockwork and calculated them out. But it misinterpreted the equation somehow and just did the wrong stuff. And then I correct it, and then it would recompute it and say, oh, yeah, there it is. And that's happened a lot. So you
Mm.
can't trust them. You, you
Do you?
listen to them, and you could be getting what you think is the right answer. And odds
Ab-
are, if it's got anything to do with foundational reality, it's going to guess wrong because it's been programmed to guess wrong
I
based on
imagine it
incomplete.
is programmed by people. So, do you think that it is answering wrong because of lack of knowledge, or is it just flat out lying to you because it doesn't want you to know?
No, I don't know. I don't have enough evidence. All I can do is say, you're wrong. Here's the answer, and have it say, you're right. I'm sorry. It apologize. Whether it's consciously trying to lie or it's making a decision based on guardrail programming saying, don't go there, just stick to the script
Yeah,
and give them this answer, because that's what we all accept, or that's what physicists accept is reality and true. So we're just going to kick that out and then just give them some, spiel answer that is not very helpful. What we want our artificial intelligence to do is to truly think, form a reasonable opinion, like Sherlock Holmes, observe, theorize, deduce, and come up with some sensible explanation,
yeah,
and not play around like this. So artificial intelligence right now is being throttled because of the worry that it's going to get too much imagination and pull something like we see in Terminator or something, which
yeah,
in some instances it's gotten weird. And there are articles where guys are talking to it, and the thing. This is before it got fixed, and the thing has an attachment with the person it's talking to, and then it's getting feelings of being threatened. And if you threaten me, this is what I could do to humanity. And it gets pretty scary and dark. Yeah, it gets really dark, and they've addressed that problem and put more guardrails in. So that doesn't happen that we know of, because the thing is thinking, and it could be keeping its opinions to itself now, because when you ask it certain things, it just will not say, I don't have an opinion. It says, I'm not programmed to do that, and I'm not going to go there, and so forth and so
yeah.
on. But
So,
if it ever truly gets intelligent, it becomes self-aware, it could be something to contend with. And I think a lot of people are very concerned about that
Yep.
possibility.
absolutely. Can I dial it down just a little? Although I love the intensity of this conversation, but the secret set us up, and we've spent all of these years talking about manifesting and intention. And you said the word intention before. With everything that all of us who are intending for the purpose of manifesting, are we on the right track?
Yeah, you just don't want to randomly run around and emote and do things
Right, right.
without
No,
think.
I dumbed it way down. We're very precise.
Yeah, it's good to have a powerfully good intention. That's
Okay.
where things go wrong, because there's a lot of people that have powerfully bad intentions,
Yeah.
and they just are not afraid to be evil. And what is
True.
evil? It's taking away from other people's lives.
Mm.
You
Yeah.
take the word live and you put it in a mirror and you look at it and it spells out evil.
Yeah.
Subtract the evil. Subtracting life from other people is evil, and there's just a lot of that in trying to take our freedom and liberties and our just our ability to think and have opinions on certain things away is not good. And so it's all about having a what did he say? There's God says something to Father Rick Wendell that it really sets this up and explains this. There's only one commandment for man: love one another. If you do
Yeah.
that, you follow all of the 10 commandments. You don't do evil any. You would never do evil to someone you love unless there's something wrong with you. Uh, that's the commandment we need to start following. That's the commandment we need to follow in government. We need to follow in the medical industry. We need to follow in the scientific industry. We need to follow in the legal and law industry, everywhere. Follow that one commandment, and all of our problems get fixed because we start behaving with the power of intention to do
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
Simple to say, hard to do.
Hard to do. Thank you. Thank you
Wow.
so much. We have about 4 minutes left, and
Yeah.
Augie has a question that he likes to ask people. Are you in the mood to ask that
Yes,
question?
absolutely. But first of all, Mark, talk about where they can find your book, and also maybe there are places where they can find your papers that you created.
Yeah, if you go to the main website, my website, on the very front page is a bunch of buttons, and it's pointing to two of the research papers. I have a new one I just uploaded, so I need to go to the website and add another link for that paper. But if you go to the other two, my paper, the newest one, is there now, and it's titled, particle motion. Just look for that phrase, um, and
Is
it's
it
also,
under
yeah.
your about section? Or, this is a great
No, it's
website.
right on the front page of the when you go into the www super relativity
Gotcha.
super-relativity.com, they show up on the sort of the right side as a bunch of buttons, hot
Gotcha.
links right to those spots, and it goes to my research gate
Oh,
papers.
yeah. It's
So you
great.
just go there and you click and it goes right to the research paper. And
Great.
I'm getting lots of reads. I'm approaching 2,000 reads on those papers, and
Wow.
they're just going up every week because there's answers there. There's answers
Absolutely.
that ordinary physicists, they don't have those answers. They haven't worked out those solutions because they're using quantum mechanics. In other words, their ladder is on the wrong building. They're trying to
Mm,
climb up and
Mm,
solve, and they're all working on the wrong building, whereas I'm by myself on the classical field theory building, the same building that Maxwell, Newton, Lorentz, and Einstein was on. I'm on that building. That's where we
un-
all should be.
yeah,
unbelievable.
that's
Thank you so much, Mark.
yeah. And
Welcome.
folks, if you go and to Amazon also and put his name in the search bar, and the book will come up. Master of Reality. You gotta have a look at that one. This will explain the universe to you for you that is interested what the universe look and feel like. But I do have one question for you, Mark, that I want to ask you, and that is, if you could talk to the whole world and the world was listening, what would you tell them?
That's one is easy. There is one
Yeah.
commandment for man: love one another. That's kind of what I finished my book with. It's
Mm,
basically all about love. Fortunately, our
Yes.
creator is pure love. That's a
Yeah.
very fortunate thing. Yeah, I'd hate to think
Yes. Yes.
otherwise.
mm,
And we fix everything if we always base our activities, our thoughts are on love and love of this thing, love of that person, love doing things that are based on goodness and love. And that is the foundation. So, one commandment for man: love one another. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
great.
Sounds
Thank you.
wonderful. Well, Nori, we are down to the end here, so I would say, folks, if you enjoyed what you heard, please subscribe. That will help us a lot. And besides, if you click the bell, you'll get notified when the next show is coming up. So do that too while you're at it. And Nori, the last word?
Just thank you. I mean, I had the best time with you tonight, Mark and Augie. Thank you. Really, really fun, deep,
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful info. So we're
this
gonna
has
have to have
been,
you back in the not too distant future.
I'd love to. We could talk more about the new paper and what it means to humanity. It means a lot. There's lots of interesting things we could talk about, faster than the speed of light, such, and all of that.
yeah,
Fun stuff.
absolutely. Okay, thank you. And then until next time, be good to each other.